This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
I appreciate that, Alex. Thank you for recognizing.
This is how legacies are built.
Halliburton takes it in the backcourt. Crosses over on Beverly. Float game for the win! Tyrese! The terror! Halliburton double team. Shot clock at 4. Nembhard's got to put it up. Step back. His three-pointer. Nembhard knocks the three down. Timeout Knicks.
Andrew Nembhard was so good.
17,000 on their feet. Siakam, a three. Siakam hits the three. 6 1/10. Pacers have the lead.
And that right there is why the Indiana Pacers traded for Pascal Siakam.
Neesmith with a running start. Oh my goodness! Just destroyed it. Aaron Neesmith. 10 seconds. McConnell baseline drive. Gives it up. Top in. Corner three. And rattles in. Indiana pulls off a shocker.
The pep in the step is back.
Johnson cut off against Murphy with 6 to shoot.
And blocked by smothered chicken. Please give me some smothered chicken on that one.
You think Tyrese Halliburton is overrated? Think again.
Pacers down 3. Halliburton's got the ball. Halliburton rises up. A 3 and is fouled. You have got to be kidding me. Right in the grill of Giannis.
And that's a miss by Kuzma at the rim. Turner flushes it down the lane. Miles Turner with authority. Oh my God.
The crowd screamed, oh my God.
8 seconds. Halliburton against Giannis. Halliburton. 3 seconds. Puts it in. He put it in. 3/10.
There's no timeout.
No timeouts for the Bucks.
Yeah! That's how we do.
What is up, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace, brought to you by the good folks over at the Blue Wire Podcast Network and our friends over at Chat BCC. And joining me is the great Brett Evans, who is a disciple of the Greg Doyle and Dan Dockage School of Basketball. Brett, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Hey, the one thing that Greg Doyle and I had in common, although I gave this up when I was like 13 years old, is that one time I did eat some leftover food that was left in the hallway at a hotel. But I think he's like in his late 50s and still does that. So interesting life choice, and I commend him for the commitment. But it's great to be here, man.
I've heard him talk about that. It's pretty interesting. It's like I mean, he has no shame either. I mean, that's what I'll say about Greg. I know that Greg gets ripped on a lot by a lot of fans, and I'm not going to dive into any of that stuff. I know Pascal and Tyrese were kind of ripping him quite a bit too, post game stuff. So he takes enough of the brunt from other people that I don't need to be giving it to him. But I will just say this: like, he's been very kind to me in person, but the food eating off other people's trays outside hotel rooms is a little bit different. But yeah, obviously, game 1, NBA Finals, the Pacers pull off a miracle. Did you have any thoughts on that game before we dive into kind of some nitty gritty stuff about that?
Yeah, let me just first say there ain't no love in Oklahoma, just the whistle of a long blue and gold train. And the world is shocked. The sports world is shocked, especially those that don't know the Indiana Pacers. But, of course, we've seen this not just in the playoffs, but all of us Pacer fans have seen this all year long. So we're not surprised. As much as we are excited about it, there's a part of us that's not surprised because this is the habit here. But here's what I want to say. All leading up to this week, this game last night, everyone was kind of analyzing this from the X's and O's and the odds and the stats and trying to figure it out. Now that we won, right? Because all those odds and all those stats showed that, Pacers don't have a chance. It's the greatest defense statistically in NBA history, blah, 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 blah. At some point, we probably need to start talking about something that's a little kooky, that's a little metaphysical, if you will. And that's divine providence, Alex. Divine providence. You see, the odds of King Leonidas and his small band of Titans defeating the mighty Persian army was next to impossible, but the odds were wrong. The odds said that the children of Israel, Alex, had no chance to escape the mighty Egyptian army when they were surrounded by mountain and sea, but the waters parted and the odds were wrong. The odds that Wilbur and Orville Wright would discover flight said it would never happen, but they were wrong. The betting odds never gave the ragtag band of colonial soldiers a chance to defeat the mighty British Empire, but the hand of God reached down to defy all odds and defeat the mighty army that created the greatest nation we've ever seen. And the odds and the metrics and all this sort of thing said that Indiana had no chance, that Tyrese Halliburton couldn't hit another game-winning clutch shot. But look what happened. The odds were wrong. I think, Alex, at some point, as woo-woo as it seems, should we be talking about divine providence here? Is this a team of destiny?
I think it is. There is no way that you see a team have 4 game-winning shots in 4 separate series the way that they have had. And I just want to say, what an incredible soliloquy that was. I mean, that was incredible. I felt the passion. I was smiling from ear to ear. I love all the examples, but it's just what this Pacers team is. There's not a great way to describe it. I was talking with Pacers assistant general manager Ted Wu today. I was texting him and he said, Alex, I'm glad I didn't agree to come on your podcast because I am out of words. I don't know what to say. I think you just kind of said it exactly for him.
What do we say? I mean, everything. I saw a stat today and I can't remember the exact things, but the odds of Tyrese, for example, in one single playoff run, having all of those game-winning shots the way that they did and how it happened, was like 1 in 1 point something million, right? It's a statistical anomaly. And you look at, there's a ton of stats on X and social media that show just how the Pacers and Tyrese in these clutch situations are so far up and to the right that they're almost off the graph in some of these charts. And so I humorously say that, but there is this thing in sports, right? There's this weird thing in sports, we talk about advanced analytics and we talk about unique X's and O's and strategy and things that you can do, and always kind of play the stats, play the odds in a certain way. But there's these certain things that happen, these certain points in history in sports where a team or if it's an individual player or in a sport, they defy all those odds and just there's a habit of it happening. And so I can't help but think this is a team of destiny. Maybe we look back on this in a few weeks and Oklahoma City figures out a way to, gentlemen sweep us like the Lakers did against the Sixers those many years ago. But I don't think so, man. I think there's something magical here. And I do think there are some unique strategic things, X's and O things that we could talk about. But I think we need to talk more about just the excitement in the air and the almost divine nature of what's going on.
I will say this. I mean, I feel like there are some people that are just so in the nitty-gritty of X's and O's and analytics that they cannot look at anything else besides just defying the odds, right? Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, the stuff that says, oh, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that, but they're finding ways to overcome all of these obstacles that seem impossible. That's what makes sports so fun. Yes, I love analytics. I love diving into X's and O's. I love hearing what people have to say about strategy and how the Pacers can attack this and how OKC does this and what the Pacers need to do that and counter all that. And I think there's a place for all that. But just like some people hate trade rumors, there's a place for that in sports. There's a place for free agent signings and all that. But this is a spot right here where sometimes you have to throw analytics out the window and just say, look, sometimes great players make big plays, and they make great plays that defy all the odds of what every analytical statistic says. And it's just like, look, 1 in 1.5 million chances that this all happens at once in one playoff run. There's no analytic that's ever going to say, yeah, that's going to happen again. Nobody would expect it. But I think every single Pacer fan last night, when they saw Nembhard hit that step-back 3 to make it a 3-point game, every Pacer fan said, okay, we're going to win this game. And that is just ridiculous because it's defying logic. But we're to the point now where the Pacers are defying logic, and it is hard not to believe this is a team of destiny.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's not even just, and this is a good segue into maybe some of the more on-court observations that I made, but it wasn't just obviously the Halliburton shot. We've seen this in every series, but the Nesmith magic, the Nembhard magic that you mentioned, Miles Turner with that bank three, even the Nembhard air ball, which might have been tipped or his hand got hit. It was kind of hard to see. And Pascal coming in, boxing out SGA, and the ball falling just perfectly on the ground and straight up for him to grab it and go up. It's just, there is something about magic, but I do think that you have to give magic or luck a place to land. And there are some observations I've made about this team that are a little bit different than some other teams in the playoffs this year, and then also Pacers teams in the past.
Yeah, I want to just talk real quickly before we go into the next thing about SGA, because SGA is a great player. Yeah. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the Pacers were down, I believe, 9 points. SGA made one layup or one shot in that final 2 minutes and 38 seconds. Yeah. But you have an Aaron Nesmith 3-point shot where Obi Toppin kind of hands the ball off to him. He's kind of turned a little bit. That was SGA's guy. SGA was playing off of him, so now Caruso has to leave Obi Toppin to try and go contest Aaron Nesmith, gives him enough space, he makes it. Andrew Nembhard hits that step back three on SGA, and then like you mentioned just a second ago, Pascal Siakam, they switch and put SGA on him because they're trying to get SGA out of all these guard matchups because he's just getting obliterated. Andrew Nembhard shoots the ball short, but because SGA is guarding Pascal Siakam, Siakam can go down there and get the offensive rebound, put the ball up. Right. SGA was attacked on the defensive side of things, and he is by far their weakest link defensively. 100%. And I know he has been giving a lot of credit. He's been given a lot of credit for being a great defender at the point guard position because of his steals numbers and things like that. He is not a great defender. He is capable of being a good team defender, but in these moments, Indiana was able to take advantage of him, and I just felt like those big moments right there kind of show you where the Oklahoma City Thunder do have some weaknesses to their team.
100%. And you would think leading up to this game that the Pacers couldn't drive to the basket, they couldn't get open shots, that this 15 players on a string, like Anthony Edwards said. So there's this like how is this going to happen? I even heard one guy say, "Hey, TJ McConnell getting into the lane, shooting shots, getting layups. That's not going to happen." Well, how many times did we see him in this game do that? But to your point about SGA in particular, you're 100% right. Like I think SGA and his defensive prowess, if you will, or lack thereof. I mean, your defensive prowess, what people say that he is on the team, he benefits a lot from what Dort does, and he benefits a lot from what the rest of that team does collectively. And I think a team like Indiana, who really excels at that 5-out and that motion offense, that flow offense that we talk about, that improvisation offense, it spreads him out a little bit more, and he's more in space. And when you get him in space, and of course, obviously a matchup with Pascal, he's not going to win that. And you saw that on display. Not to mention, I thought the strategy that the Pacers have done with Giannis and then Mitchell and then Brunson is, hey, we're gonna make you play high usage ball every single game, and then work you on defense as much as we can, and we're gonna wear you out. So you can go score 30 or 40 points a game. We're good with that. But we're gonna take everyone else away. We're gonna depend on our elite defenders like Nembhard and Nesmith to get a few timely stops, to put pressure on you, to wear you out, hunt you on defense. And we know, and we have faith that in the fourth quarter, that's going to wear on you. And it did. And Alex, in the last 3 minutes, Oklahoma City only scored 4 points. Mm-hmm. 4 points in the last 3 minutes of the game, which is absolutely unreal. And I don't think that was, an accident. I don't think that was because they were, the streak went away. I think the Pacers and the way they approached the game plan, even from the beginning of the game, made a big impact on that.
I felt like OKC looked a little bit nervous. There was guys that did not want to take the big shot, right? When Lou Dort is taking clutch shots in those final 2 minutes and 38 seconds, whatever it is, 3 minutes, you live with that if you're Indiana. He's probably their most inconsistent offensive player. Yeah. And one of the big talking points I wanted to dive into is Jaylen Williams, J-Dub, as the number 2 for Oklahoma City. I mean, if you look at who the Pacers have played, right? If you consider everybody healthy and no injuries involved, where would you rank J-Dub in terms of number 2s when you look at who they played? If you've got a healthy Milwaukee team, you've got Dame and Giannis, right? If you look at the Cavaliers, you've got Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, or even a healthy Darius Garland. If you look at, obviously, the Knicks, you got Towns and Brunson. When you look at J-Dub, to me, he might be the worst number 2 of everybody they've played so far. And that, to me, is just because of inexperience. And he hasn't really been in these moments where he's had to make so many big shots because they won more games by double digits than the Pacers won all season long.
Oh, my goodness. You make a good point there. And I was going to say something about that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's an interesting point, Alex. I think you're right. Now, look, J-Dub's going to have a game or two where he goes off. I'm sure of it. It's just the nature of these series. They take a different shape every game. Maybe he doesn't, but I think he probably will. But you have a really good point. Like, maybe here's a good litmus test. When you're watching the game, are you like, ooh, I'm worried about J-Dub? Because I was absolutely like, ooh, I'm worried about Cat. I was absolutely at times, even though the injury and I think some of the adjustments we made, I was absolutely worried about Garland. I know he was out. I was worried about him and Mobley. Yeah. And I was absolutely worried about Damon, and I'm not. I don't have that fear of J-Dub when I'm watching the game. So that's an excellent point, and you made another good point. And it's interesting because I heard Dan Patrick say this, and I was like, man, that is spot on. The Oklahoma City Thunder have the highest net rating in the NBA this year, right? They've blown teams out over and over and over again this year. And Patrick made a great point. He said, I've always worried about teams that are blowing teams out, what happens in those crunch time moments when it's a close game. And you saw that yesterday. I know that Oklahoma City had some close games, this playoffs, and especially against the Nuggets. That game 1 comes to mind. But, in the course of a season, they really haven't, right? And the Pacers have, man. They have since January. They played these games. They are cool as a cucumber. And one of the notes that I wanted to talk about is body language. And this is going to be a weird one. But I coach youth basketball. I know that you were a coach for a while. And it's so funny that when I came to coach, I always thought, okay, I'm going to talk X's and O's and fundamentals and that sort of thing. But one of the things I realized very, very early on with my girls that I coached was that body language was so important. Something bad happens, right? Don't, slump your shoulders and crinkle your face and look at the refs and, jog down the court without any energy. Forget about it and move on to the next play. I'm thinking about, this is interesting, top of mind, the closeout game against the Timberwolves. I don't know if you remember this, but in the first part of that game, it was frenetic. It was wild. Oklahoma City, they kind of do what Indiana does on defense, right? Put you in the blender, just like they did with us last night or in the first game. And there were a couple of times, I think, McDaniels or whoever, there was a couple shots outside in the corner that they missed. And you noticeably saw the team do this and jog down the court. And as soon as that happened, I was like, this game's over. Not only is this game over, this is going to be a blowout. And the Pacers don't have that. They have that, a good cornerback, they say, just has a short-term memory. You forget about it. You move on to the next play. They are outstanding about that. They started off tough, right? Obi Toppin's throwing the ball backcourt twice. You have Nesmith driving in the lane and losing the ball every time. It was wild in the beginning, and you never saw that negative body language. They were together. They were poised because they've been here, and that's why I trust this team, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think that for the Indiana Pacers, too, one other thing is their depth, right? Because if somebody doesn't have it going, right, Carlisle is not afraid to make that quick substitution. We saw him do that with Mathurin at times, especially in Game 6 against the Knicks. Mathurin was not playing much. In Game 4 and Game 5, he had some really big moments offensively and kind of felt like he was breaking through. And then he had like 2 or 3 defensive lapses there where he was really struggling, and the Pacers were giving up points to the Knicks and allowed him back into the game. Carlisle pulls him out. He did the same thing last night against OKC with Obi Toppin, pulled him out early, put Thomas Bryant in for him. Thomas Bryant was almost worse than Obi Toppin at that moment. Pulls him back out, puts Toppin back in. It's like, but they have confidence in one another. And the thing is, like, we talk about how bad Obi was to start the game. Obi Toppin's one of the biggest reasons they won the game because he shook off the rust. He kept his confidence high. He had short-term memory loss, goes 5 of 8 from 3, and they pull Miles Turner out to close the game, and they go small with Toppin because OKC decides they're going to go small and play really, really small, and it came back to bite him in the butt. And Obi Toppin is just a difference maker when he can play his style. He was just too nervous, and I feel like you can kind of tell with this Pacers team, they don't get down on themselves because they've seen themselves overcome so many obstacles. Like, go back and look at the body language from this team, especially Tyrese Haliburton in the first 25 games. He looked like some of those girls you were talking about that were hanging their head, and you're like, hey, you got to sit on the bench. This is not good. I mean, I was to the point, like, they got to pull him out. Like, he's moping and whining around and just not – he's not himself. Now you look at him, when they get down by 20 points, or even when they lose by whatever it was to the Knicks in Game 5, you see Haliburton walk off the court with a smile on his face. It's like, okay, they do not waver. They are not worried about anything, and I think that is the confidence of a champion.
That is spot on. And, like, the leadership of Carlisle to say, hey, Toppin, come sit on the bench, take a deep breath. We get it. We trust you. We need you. And he comes in, scores 17, hits 5 threes, actually had some great rebounds that were huge in that game too, that a lot of people forget about, a couple of defensive stops as well. And, exactly. It's a great point. Juxtapose that with OKC. Look what happened with Chet Holmgren. Chet was, you could see it. I was watching Caitlin Cooper earlier, and she mentioned this, that there was a play where Chet was right there and ready to make an on-ball screen for SGA to get in the action. And he literally pushed, I think it was Dort or J-Dub up and said, no, you go make that. And he had a cross match at Brewing. He was like, no, he was just mentally out of it. And it was literally Dagno took him out after that. And so you just juxtapose, we have 2 young teams, but we have one young team that's been through the fire more than the other one. And you've seen them mature more. And I honestly think, like, that and the Divine Providence we started with, I think that could get the Pacers 1 or 2 wins in this series. We already saw it gave you 1 in the series by itself. And I think at the beginning of the game, Alex, I think what's interesting about those turnovers, which was like historic numbers in that first half, is, first of all, 11 of those 20 or 11 of those, 19 turnovers in the first half, they were dead ball turnovers, which is not all turnovers are built the same. And we all know that dead balls are not as lethal as others. And to your point, a lot of the other ones were just kind of jittery, and many of them were just driving into, a sea of piranhas, and then they're just superior at swiping the ball. And they made those adjustments, and they were fine. They had 5 or 6 turnovers in the second half. That's totally doable. But what I thought, this is really interesting when we talk about pace, right? The Pacers need to play fast. We heard some mic'd up moments where the coaching staff and even Tyrese was like, hey, we need to slow down a little bit. I think a lot of people heard that and like, slow down. That's not who we are. But I think what they're saying is there's a difference between playing rushed and playing with pace. And it's like when I tell my kids to, like, let's hurry, let's get dressed, but don't rush. Because when we rush, we make mistakes and we forget things. But let's do it with focus and urgency is what I'm saying. And so you could tell the Pacers were playing rushed, right? It was just the lights were bright, things were moving really fast. And then that's not the type of pace we needed to play with. We need to play with pace, not just in fast break opportunities, but on the half court, making the first read, shooting the shot when you're open fast, and playing together. And I saw that at the beginning. It was rushed and not with pace, and then they settled into that pace piece very quickly.
No, I think it's a great point, and I think Lloyd Pierce even told Lisa Salters this at halftime. We're playing too fast, and you're kind of thinking, how can the Pacers play too fast? Like, we're talking about a team that after the Knicks will make a basket, Siakam's dunking the ball with 21 seconds left on the shot clock. Like, they're not playing too fast. That's what they do. No, there is a difference. And I think it's a great point you bring up your kids and kind of how you explain the difference between playing with, getting ready with pace versus rushing, right? You don't want to forget things. And I think the Pacers were forgetting what got them there. Like, they have to have meaning and purpose to what they're doing. And you bring up a good point, too. They were taking the second to third or fourth shots in that first half. They were not taking the first open look.
Right.
But then you look at what they did in that fourth quarter specifically. It was, I've got an open look. Let's take the shot. Because against this defense, how much better of a shot are you going to get as the shot clock starts to wind down? You can't beat this team when you let the shot clock get to 7 seconds or less remaining. You got to beat them in the first 8 to 10 seconds of the shot clock. So that to me was huge, and I think it was a massive reason why the Pacers came back. You could tell in that second half their process and everything else just slowed down finally. And they cut it to 6 points before SGA hits a three to close out the third. But like at that point, when you'd cut the 12-point deficit to 6, and you had all those turnovers early on, it just kind of showed you like, okay, I think Indiana's starting to figure this out. And I had someone texting me about, man, this OKC defense, like they just are all over you. I said, trust me, this OKC defense, when you put the ball anywhere in their vicinity, they're like bees on a honeycomb. They're going to swarm to it and stick to it. But if you can keep them from getting to where they want to get to, because they want to speed you up, that's the thing. They want to play fast and speed you up. You can play with pace, but don't let their defense dictate what you're doing. You let your offense dictate it and take the right shots, and they can't do what they want to do, which is what limited them from getting out and beating the Pacers by 25 points, because a lot of those dead ball turnovers ended up working in the Pacers' benefit.
Yeah, exactly. And there was 2 stats for me that I thought were huge while we're on that topic is, and a lot of people have talked about this, but one was the fact that with those 25 turnovers, they only scored 11 points off of those 25 turnovers. That's unreal. Mm-hmm. Now, some of those came at the end of quarters. If you remember, they were kind of weird, like got them and they quickly had to heave something down the court. But it also, transition defense was unbelievable to this game with the Pacers. And I don't think OKC's ever seen that effort from other teams, or they've rarely seen that effort from other teams in transition. And then the other ones were rebounds. That was the craziest stat to me, that we had a plus 17 rebounds. I actually think we ended up with more offensive rebounds by a margin, by a factor as well. That was so bizarre to me, because just like naked eye, you thought the tips and the second chance points and the offensive rebounds, they were killing us. But as the game progressed, right, the Pacers just settled in. Nesmith was getting rebounds. Siakam was getting rebounds. Halliburton was getting rebounds. And it was just unbelievable that, some of these statistical things that happened were very quiet, in my opinion. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
I didn't know some people have talked about this before, but what was your thoughts about Dagnall's lineup adjustment in Game 1?
Yeah, so I've heard some people talk about this too, and I will say I do understand the reasoning behind it because of how fast Indiana likes to play, and now they can maybe switch things a little bit easier, and it does give you a better on-ball defender to guard Nembhard, who is also a very good secondary playmaker. If you want to put Lou Dort on Halliburton, if you don't have him out there, then who is guarding him at that point? Is it SGA? Is it J-Dub? Like, that's just a different matchup with, a bigger lineup of Hartenstein and Chet. But I felt like the person who was going to take advantage of them going smaller was the person I felt like probably had the most consistent game overall for Indiana, and that's Pascal Siakam.
Absolutely.
19 points. I mean, no offense to J-Dub, and I asked a few different people on our preview podcast before the Game 1 series started, I'm like, if they go small, can J-Dub really hang with Pascal? And they're like, oh, yeah, J-Dub is so strong and such a great defensive player. And I'm like, hey, maybe I'm just a little bit delusional here because I've been watching a lot more Pascal Siakam, but Pascal Siakam is a difference maker. He's a guy that makes quick decisions, and he's not going to let you kind of dictate where he's going to go. He's going to either shoot over you before you get a chance to contest it. He's going to get his back against you and make a quick spin move and then a herky-jerky move. To me, I thought it was a bit reactionary, and to me, it screamed, oh, God, we're going for the kill, but we're also panicked a little bit because if we have 2 bigs out there and they take advantage, we could lose this game. So I felt like it showed to me like we're kind of nervous about this team.
Isn't that interesting? That's what I thought, man. I think psychologically that's very interesting. Yeah. That you let the other team dictate your, like, even if it was just from an optics standpoint, start Hardenstein, start Holmgren, and then, maybe even in the first 1 minute, make a substitution in case of Wallace, right? But they didn't do that. I thought there's something psychological. There's a psychological element to this series, to NBA series. And I think that in a low-key way is a nod that, hey, we are scared of the Pacers. And to your point about Siakam and this analysis that J-Dub can hold his own there, they were using examples about how he guarded Randall and shook him up, and guarded Jokic a little bit as well. The style of play is completely different. Yeah. And we all know that Randall, when he gets the ball in the paint, he dribbles 10, 15 times. His bag is limited. He's a big body guy. And so what happens is that the honeybees swarm, like you said, and they take over, right? They create a turnover. Pascal doesn't play that way. He'll back you up. He'll face you as well. He has a bag. He can spin left. He can spin right. He does that little fake back and then scoop up to the basket. And he's so skilled in that fadeaway, that little mini fadeaway. It's a different skill set. And so I just thought that move was interesting by Dagnall. And I'll say this. Are you familiar with the Edgar Allan Poe poem Cask of Amontillado? Or Amontillado, sorry.
I am not. So you have to educate me on this one.
It's kind of a dark poem, but let me give you the story. So there's a guy named Montessor, I believe was his name. And the poet Edgar Allan Poe says that Montessor was deeply offended by a guy named Fortunato. And so he got Fortunato a little tipsy at a party, and he lured him into his family's catacombs. This is in Italy back in the Middle Ages. And he lured him by saying he had this unique cask of Amontillado that he wanted to share, and he was playing and toying with his pride on how he knew wine and drink better than anything else. And at the end of the story, this guy lures him into the catacombs and slowly but surely, brick by brick, buries him alive in the walls of the catacomb. I know it's very morbid and macabre, but there's an illustration here. This is exactly what the Pacers do to every team, is that they take your pride and your confidence in whatever you do, whatever is your thing, and progressively over the course of the game, it may not look good, but brick by brick, they're setting you up for failure later in the game. And what's one of Oklahoma City's strengths? It's their aggressiveness on defense. They overhelp on drives. That's why they're giving up the most corner threes of any team in the NBA playoffs this year. They will attack passing lanes more aggressively than others. They'll go for the ball more than others. And that was bothering the Pacers early, but once the Pacers settled down, all of those things that they did were swung into the advantage of the Indiana Pacers. Their aggressiveness, like Caruso's aggressiveness and Dort's aggressiveness, trying to go over ball screens instead of coming back on switches, it killed them. And that's what led to these open threes in the fourth quarter. And so the Pacers, by hook or by crook, whether they mean to do that, are brick by brick creating this wall, and then you're buried alive, and before you even know it, before it's way too late. So it's just so fascinating to see how the Pacers do this game in and game out.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about just how they were able to create so many open looks, because if OKC does make an adjustment, right? Like, one thing I could see them doing is say, hey, we got to stay home on our shooters a little bit more and not collapse the paint as much.
Right.
That's going to change how they play. And going back to the lineup.
By the way, if I sorry to interrupt, and if that happens, Halliburton and Mathurin will both go for 25.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers are gonna make you think about what you're doing defensively, because they have so many ways of beating you, which makes them so much fun to watch. But going back to the lineup change really quick, I'm trying to remember what I was going to say here. I just don't like the fact that you take away the lineup you've used all playoff run long, and then kind of like change up combinations and rotations, because I mean, we understand the Pacers have had weird rotations at times, like, this group hasn't played together, but for the most part, how many times have you seen when the group that doesn't play much together has a great run? They don't. They usually struggle. It's usually the guys that are familiar with one another and what their role is supposed to be, and that's why I do think that with OKC making these changes, all right, it's like Hartenstein, you haven't been coming off the bench all year. You've been starting for the most part. Chet dealt with some injuries, and there's been times when he hasn't played with the starters and they've gone with Chet at the 5, but like to start off that way and say, okay, now you're going to be with this bench unit. And I think every OKC fan's like, well, Hartenstein killed Thomas Bryant. Well, that's not the point. We know he can do that. It's he's a starting center. You're paying $30-some million to say, hey, come off the bench and play 12 minutes. I mean, that's not why you brought him there. So I just felt like Indiana making them play a certain style in game 1 really didn't matter. But I want to say what I noticed mostly, especially in the fourth quarter, was Indiana's ability to get into the paint and then kick it out to shoot it, right? But they made them suck in and made them like, okay, this is what we know you want to do. And it's almost like I mentioned this to people today when I was talking to him. It looked like Andrew Nembhard was a running back driving into the lane. I mean, the way that Caruso and those guys were grabbing and holding him, he was like securing the ball, either laying it up or like, I got to get rid of it real quick, because he knew the moment he gave them a chance to swarm on him, they were going to get it. And this is when you see Obi Toppin start drilling threes. The quick decisions by Miles Turner with the quick shot that he made on a pick and roll he ran with Nembhard. It was like a 17, 18-footer where he's catching it in movement. Like, I don't think people realize how difficult of a shot that was that Miles made. And then you also include the one where Miles hit the bank 3 earlier. I mean, that was just Miles making that on Chet. Pump fake, step back, off the glass. I mean, they just had to make quick decisions, but their ability to get into the paint opened up the outside shots for them. And they weren't all corner threes, but they were, elbow threes, things like that. And they just found different angles to beat them at.
Alex, I was told the Pacers, it would be impossible to get in the paint. Did you hear all the analysis leading up to game 1? They're like, McConnell's not going to get in, Nembhard's not going to get in, Halliburton's not going to. No one's going to get in the paint. It's literally like they were painting a picture like there was a literal brick wall around the paint that they wouldn't be able to get into. We actually got in there quite a bit. Now, some of it early on was tragic Bronson, right? Nick Nesmith trying to make stuff happen, and there was the Halliburton drive-in where I think SGA actually did get a swipe early on in the game. But once we settled down, the paint opened up, and it was because of our actions. It's the second, third, fourth action in our flow offense. I know that they're a great defense, but OKC isn't used to playing, into the second, third, and fourth action. They're just not. Minnesota didn't do that. Memphis definitely didn't do that, right? Like, so my point is like there was a plan to make it there, and we were able to make it there. There's one play in particular I think about where, of course, the linebacker reference with Nembhard, where he did the little Euro, and he was wrapped up and still that D cell that we see him do all the time, but he was wrapped up this time and he finished. But the other one was he drives in and he created such a gravitational pull. 3 defenders came in. He did that little rondo pivot back to, I think it was Toppin, behind him. It was Toppin's literally behind him. And he 180 pivots and hits him. And it couldn't have been a more wide open shot. Someone, I think, I don't know who it was, Joe or Wallace or someone tried to close it out. It was way too late. Yeah. And I just think, and it's so funny because there's so much that they can clean up and so much they can do better. And that's what makes me so excited. And look, kind of leading into the second game, what I think will happen, I do think Dagnall, this is just my prediction, is probably going to force the too big thing now. I think it's going to be like an overcorrection point of emphasis. Maybe I'm wrong. And if that happens, then Pascal and Miles are going to eat. We're going to go 5 out, and we're going to eat them up again. But what I think Dagnall might do, this is my prediction, is OKC, the reason why they're so good at transition D just historically like this year is they're not a great offensive rebounding team just like the Pacers are. And that's somewhat by design, right? Because their whole thing is one shot, get back, right? And if we can get a tip, let's do that. But they had some early success, and we've seen the Pacers struggle, especially in that New York series against Mitchell Robinson and of course Josh Hart. We've seen the Pacers struggle with keeping people off the offensive glass who are good at it. So I wonder if Dagnall, in the spirit of changing things up like he did Game 1, I have this just feeling that maybe he'll put Hartenstein out there, and of course he's a liability on both sides of the court. Well, not defensively, even defensively, he's a liability. But one thing he can do is play that kind of Mitchell Robinson role, where if he says, "Hey, don't get back, just go get rebounds." I think Caitlin Cooper alluded to this pre-game, Game 1, and I almost feel like that's what Dagnall's going to try to do. And I think we're going to see a more aggressive Chet Holmgren. I think you're going to see more outside shooting from him. There was, that one play where there was a defensive miscommunication. It was a simple pick and roll with SGA. He had a wide open, dunk at the rim. It was one of his only, 2 shots that he hit in the game. I think we're going to see a bigger emphasis on simplifying the offense instead of doing SGA ISOs, high utilization SGA ISOs all game, which I think the Pacers forced into, but it was also a decision. So those are the 2, I think, big adjustments we might see from OKC. And then, of course, the Pacers side, it's just cleaning things up. But look, man, if we keep shooting at the clip that we're shooting through this series, I don't see how Oklahoma City, with any sort of adjustment, can stop our outside shots. We're going to continue in this series to get outside shooting. And to your point, if they decide to take that away and open up the lanes, look out Mathurin, look out Halliburton, look out Nembhard. We're going to eat that up as well. And that's what this offense is so potent. It's so pick your poison, man. We can beat you any way that we want.
Yeah, Indiana's offense will give you nightmares because there's guys that can't always put the ball on the floor successfully, or you don't want them to do it very often if you're Indiana. Like you brought up Nesmith, not being a guy that you really want to see put the ball on the floor, especially with this defense out there. But if you have guys like Nembhard, Mathurin, McConnell will thrive if there's not a big out there. Take it to his little, stop and shoot real quick on you before you even realize he's going up for the shot. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be what they end up doing overall, because if I'm OKC and I'm looking at what happened in this game, I'm thinking to myself, we should have won this game, and we should have won it by a lot more than, losing it by 1, obviously. I mean, they could have been up by 25 points at the end of the first half. They just didn't shoot the ball particularly well. And maybe you just say, hey, if we shoot better with Caruso and guys like that missed a lot of those shots, like you mentioned, Chet had a terrible game, just 2 of 9 from the field. Like, if you get more contributions from Chet and J-Dub and Caruso, and maybe even a little bit more from Hartenstein, maybe you don't have to overcorrect it. Because I do think one thing with Dagnall is he overthinks things a little bit too much.
Yeah.
If you go back, I heard a lot of Thunder podcasts talking about this today as well. In game 1 against the Nuggets, and instead of just putting Hartenstein on Jokic, they started out with Holmgren on Jokic, and Holmgren was just lost. Chet was lost out there, and they ended up pulling that from them. So we'll see what happens, because I do agree with you though. There's things that OKC can still do to kind of make some tweaks like that, but sometimes what we've seen from the Pacers too, it's just execute what you did, but do it better. And if they do what they did it better in execution-wise, they could win. But you also have to realize Indiana's not going to turn the ball over 25 times, 19 times in the first half like they did in Game 1. They were super nervous. They were tight. Now they're playing with house money at this point. They feel confident. They came in there and stole a victory when they really didn't play well. They were even saying it as they're walking off the court. Pascal and Ty are saying, we won that one, but we didn't even play great. So they feel so confident with what they can do. And I just feel like Indiana has so many ways to beat you. And Carlisle's ability to adapt. I think Zach Lowe mentioned this on his podcast today, which I thought was just terrific. He said, I don't think that Rick Carlisle and his coaching staff showed their hand on everything they could do. They kind of weathered the storm early on and said, all right, let's just keep focusing on what we're doing and attack what we've been practicing. But they've got other tricks up their sleeves that they can throw to make this, really drastic of a change. And we'll see what OKC does to try to make this better. But yeah, I feel like OKC's got to be on their back heels right now, because if they lose Game 2, they're in a lot of trouble.
A lot of trouble. And by the way, shout out to the defense. I think what could tip the scale in this series is how many times do you get SGA on the line, right? And he got his. He got to the line, but man, there were 5 or 6 times that I think with any other team that SGA was, skillfully, I'm not saying this disrespectfully, going for the foul, and Nembhard with verticality, just standing straight up. We saw Pascal do the same thing. Just discipline, not leaving your feet on those little, pump fake. Let him shoot those fadeaway middies that he's very good at, high percentage wise. Mm-hmm. But over a course of a game, we'll take those percentages over, to the basket and ones at the rim. And you could tell that was a point of emphasis that Carlisle and his team and his staff put with that team, because it was obvious. And once again, going back to experience, we did the same thing against Mitchell and we did the same thing against Brunson. Brunson is notorious, free throw merchant. And I say that with respect. I don't mean that disrespectfully. But we started to, we played that well. And then it's almost like the 3 teams we played leading up to this finals were like perfect Mr. Miyagi type of teams that were wax on, wax off, paint the fence, all those things that were perfectly set up for us in this series. Mm-hmm. And man, it's just really exciting. I do have a question for you.
Okay.
To change gears, I know we're probably winding down in the episode.
Let me just say this point real quick before you ask me. The last thing I want to say is, and I've talked to a few people about this today, just because people were asking me about the game everywhere I was going. Obviously, big listeners of the podcast, so I appreciate that. But I will just say, Indiana is not built like any other team is built in the league. When you look at the way teams are built, it's kind of like we have this one guy and this number 2 guy, and then everybody else just kind of fills in. But they don't just say, hey, Tyrese, go out there and score 30 points like you see the Knicks do with Jalen Brunson. It's like, we got Brunson's our guy, Cat's our number 2, that's how we're going to play. The Pacers, if you look at how they're kind of built, you would say, oh, Tyrese is their number 1, Siakam's their number 2. Yes, that is true, but they could be 4th or 5th in scoring, and you could have Nembhard, Nesmith, and Toppin or Turner lead you in scoring, because they don't really care about scoring points. I mean, I don't think anybody scored more than 19 last night in the game. Everybody else was in, there's a lot of guys in double digits in that 10 to 19 range, which you don't think, oh, that's a lot of points. You're thinking, oh, they're not a 30-point scorer like SGA. They're not a superstar, which is why you hear all that Screaming A. Smith stuff out there, right? I mean, we might need to bring in the H.H. Gregg twins to have this debate with us for the 15th time, whether Tyrese Halliburton's or Stephen A. Smith's even a superstar. But I digress. I'm just saying that is one thing I think is so hard to gauge for or game plan for with this Pacers team. They can beat you in multiple ways, and we kind of hinted at that, but just because you can take Tyrese out of the game, right? You can say we're going to limit Tyrese, and the Pacers are worse when they do that, but Nembhard's capable enough of running the offense without Halliburton having to be the dominant ball handler. We saw it last night. Nesmith can get on a run and make shots. Turner can take advantage of mismatches in the post at times. He can, if you want to put a big on him and you want to play pick and roll and get in drop coverage, pick and pop, he'll shoot you to death from outside. Obi Toppin come in the game and change things up. Mathurin can do stuff. McConnell. I mean, that's why I just think this is like a true. This is a
Shepard had a positive impact on this game.
He did, and Thomas Bryant even had moments.
Thomas Bryant,
I think this is a true definition of the Pacers are kind of built like a college team. They're not built like your average NBA championship team. They don't play that way, and they know their strengths. And I think that's what makes them so much fun to watch. Is they have guys that you can root for that are going to get accolades. But they have so many guys that do different things. I mean, I put a question out on Twitter. I said, "Who has been your favorite Pacer this postseason?" And I guarantee, somebody put yes as the question, the answer.
It's just who's it going to be this game? Yeah. Who's it going to be this game? It's literally we had the Nesmith game, we've had the Nembhard game, we had the Thomas Bryant game. It's unbelievable. It's literally. It goes back to the magic we talked about. It's just the togetherness of this team, starting at the top with Tyrese, who, everyone's going to get on his case because he doesn't score 30 points a night, but that's by design. He wants to get his team involved. There's some plays that, and of course there's the argument you want to see him be more aggressive, but there are some plays when they would face guard him and he would just knowing that he'd be face guarded, let me just go out to the corner, stay back by the half court line, because now we can play 4-on-4, because I know that my guys are better than my 4 guys are better than those 4 guys. He's unselfish. That just trickles down. And by the way, one funny side note, because you mentioned Dort scoring all those points and those 5, I think one of the best things that happened in game 1, Alex, was Dort hitting those 5 threes.
Yep.
Can I tell you why? Because now that dude is going to have so much confidence going into game 2 and game 3 or whatever. Like, I'm on a heater. And you even saw that at the end of the game. He had one shot where Nembhard was closing in fast at him. SGA was wide open at the top of the key. And he shoots this crazy 3-point shot that clanked off. Sometimes you can win the battle, but the winning the battle does not help you in the long run with the war, right? And I honestly thought, I was like, go for it, buddy. Keep shooting those threes. I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, I was going to ask you this before we go, and I wanted to show you one thing real quick too, for your YouTube audience. What are your thoughts? I got one little funny thought about the ratings being the lowest since 1988. What are your thoughts about that?
I thought I also saw where it was like the most watched live game.
Oh, sure.
In the fourth quarter. Like, I think it was it was really close to what the Super Bowl was showing at the beginning of the Super Bowl this year with the Chiefs and the Eagles. A lot of people tuned in late, so I don't know how that really impacts ratings. I don't really know how ratings overall work, to be honest with you. But I'll just say this. If anybody's not watching this series, they just don't like basketball.
They don't like basketball.
They're obsessed with market and stars. And I've heard people talk about this being one of the greatest finals games ever. We're talking like Mount Rushmore of NBA finals games is a game 1 between 2 small market teams. What do they call it? The flyover? Flyover finals, and so many people complaining about it. But what do they do the next day? They go on their TV shows, their sports shows, and they can't stop talking about how incredible this game was, even though they trashed it for 3 days in a row because they don't want to have to play or be a part of the Midwest summer vacation time. It's like, I want to be in Miami, I want to be in California, put me in New York and Boston. It's part of the problem, I think, with the NBA is just the coverage we get.
100%.
I brought up Screaming A. Smith, but he's part of it. I remember him like, I don't want to go to this place. I want to go to Miami for my vacation. Well, it's like,
yeah.
Who cares? Like, Milwaukee versus Miami. I think that's what it was at one point when they were playing each other, and he was talking about that. I think it's a little bit ludicrous. I think it's stupid. And
I do too.
You don't see that problem with the NFL, right? If you were to see like Kansas City, they're a flyover.
Yeah,
they're a flyover area.
Like what Adam Silver said, if Green Bay versus the Pittsburgh Steelers was the Super Bowl, everyone would be thrilled at that.
Yeah.
It's silly. I do think it's how it's covered. I do think there's just some practical parts of that too. Like, of course, New York City has 14 million people. Of course, you're going to have a bigger population of people watching the Knicks than, the 2+ million in Indianapolis, and then Oklahoma City, whatever that is, probably somewhere around the same 1.5 million. Just by nature of that, of course, it's going to be, the viewership is going to be lower in that way. But I do think there is a cultural problem in the NBA, just like you said. If the Pacers had been on TV all year, maybe people would be like, wow, this team is unbelievable. And I do think you're going to start to see that ramping up. I also think another practical thing is like we're in this weird transitional time in the NBA where there's a changing of the guards thing happening right now in the NBA, where we'll look back at these 2 teams probably in 5 years the same way we looked at Golden State and we looked at Giannis's Bucks and those types of things. Not from a dynasty standpoint per se, but the talent level that's on the team, right? Like Nembhard and Nesmith, and you could argue with more development, although he's not there now. Someone like Mathurin. These guys will probably be they have stars potential in the next 5 years. Same with the OKC guys, like J-Dub. Obviously, SGA is now, although I would say he's probably the weakest superstar MVP we've seen in a long time. these guys are going to be household, like superstar or star names in the next 5 years. We're just in that weird transition period. So I think that's that. But there is one group of people that chose not to watch the broadcast that I actually can empathize with. Do you want to know what that group of people is?
Yeah, I do want to know.
The group of people who refused to watch the broadcast because of Richard Jefferson and Doris Burke. I can totally sympathize with those people. That's just my personal opinion, Alex. I don't want to mess up any future guests that you might have. But dear Lord, that's just my little – you don't have to comment on that. That's my funny one-off on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Rick Carlisle did go to bat for Doris Burke before the game. I'm sure you saw the highlights of that where he just kind of talked about how she's like a pioneer of women in sports. And
I respect that. I have nothing against – and by the way, I have nothing against women broadcasters or there's actually some excellent women broadcasters out there. But it's not that. It's the – I think some of – it's not even just her. It's Richard Jefferson as well. It's for basketball analysts – like it's very weak analysis in my opinion. It doesn't seem like they've really studied these teams, right? No. Maybe OKC more than Indiana, but like there's certain comments they make. I'm like, what do you mean? If you've been watching, like I'll give you one example. Richard Jefferson said in the broadcast, "Wow, the OKC's taken Hallie out of this game so much. Nimhart's been the primary ball handler the whole game." I'm like, bro, the entire year, even with teams that aren't taking Hallie out, there's always a large stretch of the game and large sequences where Nimhart is the primary ball handler and Hallie plays off ball. Same when McConnell comes in. McConnell comes in, there's that period where McConnell and Halliburton play for a few minutes together. He's always playing off ball. Like, bro, like, that's the thing that drives me nuts as a basketball fan. Like, just do your research and know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I will say a couple of things. I think this is where the ESPN does miss Doc Rivers. I think Doc Rivers was good on the broadcast before he went back to coaching.
And Mark Jackson and Steve.
Mark Jackson to me did not give much. He just had the same line over again: hand down, man down. Mama, there goes that man. See,
come on, those are great.
They're great, but there's not analysis.
Stan Van Gundy's like cantankerous. Like, I don't know about that one. I know that's the right call, but I hate that. That's just brilliant broadcasting, Alex. Yeah. I love that.
I like Stan Van Gundy. I thought a lot of Pacer fans were like, he's so Knicks biased. I'm like, look, you've got Reggie Miller on the call, okay? Like,
I never thought that.
There's a lot of Pacer fans I saw on Twitter saying that.
That's stupid. I actually didn't even think Reggie. First, I know Stan. I don't think Stan Van Gundy was that way. I think Stephen A. Smith was last year when the ESPN covered the series. Yes. I didn't even think Reggie was all that biased towards Indiana. I thought he did a good job. Like I remember that one where he was like, "This is going to be a flagrant." Remember they were looking at the flagrant? It's like, come on, Reggie, that's not a flagrant. Like
the Obi Toppin one, yes, when they called a common foul. Yeah.
I was like, come on, man. Like, so I thought Reggie was pretty good. I mean, come on, dude. It's his Indiana Pacers. They're going to the finals. Like after the series is over and you're mad he's in the trophy presentation. Give me a break.
I know.
I wanted to show you one thing real quick, Alex.
Yeah, for sure.
This, you probably can't see it very well. You know who that is?
I can't. Is that you?
That's me, buddy. That's me 25 years ago underneath the Arts Garden of the Rest in Peace, formerly Circle Center Mall. After the Pacers won 25 years ago to go to the finals, caption says, this is Indy Star, page 2, June 3rd, 2000. Brett Evans left, greeted passing motorists at Washington and Illinois streets after the Pacers' victory. Police reported no problems. But me and a group of our friends, after we won, we went downtown. We had to be in the mix. The place was wild. People were driving by. I was giving high fives. People are out of their cars. And it's just unbelievable. 25 years later, here we are back here. And, man, we have a chance to win this, buddy.
I know.
We have a chance to bring an NBA title to Indianapolis for the first time in history. And, bro, I've been a Pacer fan since, Vern Fleming and George McLeod were on this team, and here we are, 3 games away. We just got to go 3-3, man.
Yeah. Someone was asking me about this today, and I thought it was a really good point by me that I brought up. I said, look, when you go back and look at the Reggie teams when they were playing the Lakers in the 2000 finals, that team was supposed to win a championship at some point. Everyone kind of had those expectations. They had been together so long. They almost took Jordan's, Bulls to they took them to 7, and they probably would have won a title that year if they beat the Bulls. They would have beat the Utah Jazz in the 7. If we would
have been New York in '99, I am convinced we would have won a championship that
against
year.
the Spurs in the lockout year.
Larry Johnson 4-point play that gives me 90 yards, but keep going.
Yes. So my whole point is that team had set expectations of this is a title contending team.
Oh, this is a good point.
The Pacers this year, nobody had expectations. Everyone kind of went into it thinking, okay, they got swept in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They kind of had a fluke run because a lot of injuries to Milwaukee, no Giannis. Then the Knicks just kind of kept going down one by one. If OG doesn't get hurt after game 2, do they end up beating the Knicks? And you can say all that stuff. And I think Tyrese bringing it up post-game saying we took it personal. To me, it's this team is so laser focused. I never once had expectations of them making it to the NBA Finals. I thought if they can make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals and compete against Boston and make it a series, that would be a step, forward from last year. But the fact that they're 3 games away, like you said, from winning it, that's what makes this title run so impressive because it was not on the table. For OKC, people were saying they could win a title this year. Nobody thought the Pacers could actually win, and here they are, 3 games away. That's what to me makes this so fascinating.
Man, that is a great point, Alex, and it makes it that much sweeter, right? Because, I was sitting there. I was actually at Cambridge at the watch party. I was there with my whole family, and I'm watching the game, and it was between 10 and 13 points. We could never get it down to 6, and then it would bloom back up to 12, and it's just not our night, all these turnovers, all this stuff. And it was just I was sitting there and I realized in the last minute, I was like, wait a minute, this is a 3-point game. Wait a minute, it's a 1-point game. I was in a malaise. And I think it's the same kind of thing with the season. It's we're so excited, but it's wait a minute, wake up. We are actually in the finals and we literally just won the first game. It's almost I can't, what have I been doing? I've been asleep to this.
Yes.
That's a really, really good point. And I think at some point we can't do this now because I don't want to jinx it, but I do think it'll be interesting, as a what if we beat Oklahoma City this year, where does this rank all time in not just NBA, but sports upsets all time? That might be a good thing to explore when we win this thing in the summer. Maybe if anyone's still listening to this blowhard right here, that'd be cool to hear. Put in the comments, where would this rank, right? I think of the 2000s, just off the top of my head, the 2007 New York Giants, who beat that undefeated New England Patriots team with Brady and Randy Moss, unbelievable upset. The David Tyree catch. That was talking about divine providence, right? What else? There's so many that we could think of. Some of the NCAA Cinderella wins over the years. There's so many to think of, but I'd be interested to know, because I did see a stat, and this was interesting. I saw a stat today that said the strength of schedule of the Pacers, or the strength of schedule of all the playoff teams, the Pacers had the hardest path to get to the finals.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it was, oh, sorry, I said that wrong. It wasn't for this year. It was for all finals participants in the last, whatever it was, 10 or 20 years. Pacers had the hardest strength of schedule, with all the metrics that show that they had the hardest path to get here. Which I think about the 2011 Mavericks, which everyone says what a run. Of course, Carlisle was the coach of that team, where they beat Portland, and then they beat I know they beat Kobe and the Kobe's Lakers in that, and they beat someone else, and a really good team in that. And then of course they beat the Heatles. But they didn't even have a harder path than the Pacers, which is wild to think about.
It is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, because what was Milwaukee? About the same record as Indiana? I think like a game less than Indiana in terms of win-loss. They maybe won 48, 49 games.
Literally, I think it was like one game apart from Milwaukee and Indiana and one game apart from Milwaukee and New York. It was like that close.
Yeah, that's what makes it so interesting because a lot of teams they played were right there in the same like record-wise as them and things like that. I'm trying to figure out who the Mavericks played here.
I know they played Portland first round. Brandon Roy, David, what's his name? What was that guy's name? Aldridge?
LaMarcus Aldridge?
LaMarcus Aldridge.
David Aldridge is the writer for.
Yeah, I was going to say David, not David. Shout out David Aldridge. And by the way, shout out the H.H. Gregg twins. That was a great call out from earlier. Who was that second round? Was it Kobe?
So yeah, they beat Portland in 6.
Yeah,
they won that 4-2. Then they beat the Lakers in 4. They swept the Lakers.
The Kobe Gasol Lakers in the second round. Who was the Western
OKC?
OKC, that's right.
4-1.
Harden, KD, and Westbrook, right? That OKC team.
Yeah.
And then they beat the Heatles. That's an all-time run. But even that, they said, was not as hard strength of schedule wise as the Pacers were in the finals, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I don't know if you noticed or not, but Mike Breen did call the Indiana Pacers Dallas in the first quarter when Carlisle called a timeout.
Oh, I did notice. You know who noticed that? My son, my 7-year-old son, said he just said Dallas, and I was like, I don't think he did. And then I saw on social media the next day people were clowning about that. I was like, my son Jude was spot on about that. He did say Dallas.
Yeah, I think that talking point was over the top, and I also I don't know if you know this or not, but SGA and Andrew Nembhard, they've known each other since they were 9 years old. I only heard that about 40 times yesterday on the broadcast. And that to me is like going back to your broadcast point. Like, if you listen to Richard Jefferson and Doris Burke, they make you feel smart after you just spent an hour listening to Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A. Smith. And maybe the ESPN higher-ups don't even realize how little they're actually giving you, but it's because they're listening to these yo-yos where you got Kendrick Perkins before the game saying, I got the OKC Thunder, and they're not losing a home game. They're winning every home game.
The Pacers will not win on this court. Like, come on, dude. I absolutely.
Nixon 5. This is a clown, man. This guy does not know basketball. He just he wants to be Stephen A. That's what he does. He wants to be Stephen A. with his hot takes and get on camera. It's a joke. I think he knows more than he acts like.
100%. There's such a noticeable difference between the ESPN like template and the TNT template. And I'm not trying to be overly romantic about TNT when I say this, although RIP TNT Sports, but it's a different flavor. The entertainment that the TNT folks brought, the Kenny and the Chuck and the chemistry that they had was it was pure. They had more long form interactions. They were able to just kind of play. And you could tell ESPN is just feeding them say the hot take, say the thing that's going to rile people up. Let's talk about whether or not they're a superstar. Let's talk about the face of the league. It's God, quit trying to let's just have fun with this. Let's do actual analysis of this. Hey, real quick, speaking of Nembhard and SGA, did I see it? The broadcast kind of cut this off, but when Nembhard shook SGA up on that crossover step back 3, that was unreal, and one mixtape worthy. Did I see SGA dap up Nembhard when he did that, or did I miss it? The camera kind of cut, and I saw Nimby kind of reach his hand out and it cut. I was wondering if you caught that, because I saw that and I was like, ooh. It looked like SGA was like, hey man, you got me on that one. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not catch that. Only thing I ever caught was the little interaction they had before that when Nembhard was on defense, and it looked like SGA didn't like a foul that he gave him and kind of pushed him.
They had a little
kind of nudged him, and then Nembhard went back and nudged him back, and the officials didn't say anything, which I appreciate. I didn't think it was necessary to call double technicals there for any reason, but I didn't see anything on that shot. I mean, if SGA's dapping up Nembhard after that, I mean, that's a terrible look. I
want to know if anyone else saw that, because it wasn't clear. I wanted to know if there was another angle. It kind of Go back and watch the broadcast right after that, or even the highlights.
Yeah, I'll have to put it in slow-mo.
It looked like he kind of reached out and gave a little like, hey, nice one. But yeah, the whole like little game within the game things are fascinating. And you got Nimhard wearing SGA's shoes. He wears the shoes, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I don't know if he wore them last night, but I mean, I don't know why you would change them. I mean, they're just shoes. But
how crazy would it be if he came out wearing Halley's ones on them?
Should all wear the Halley shoes. That would be great.
I actually think they look sick. Obviously, I'm not.
The
I'm not
hibiscus color, yeah. They should all shave their heads, and they should all wear the hibiscus shoes. I mean, that would be such a throwback.
That would be a throwback from the 2000 squad for sure. Man, yeah. Rick Smits with his bald head. That was not a good look for him, brother.
It was not. So we have reached a point where we're talking about bald-headed Rick Smits at this point in the podcast. I think it's time to wrap this one up. Brett, thank you so much. And if you want people to interact with you on social media, where can they find you at?
You know what? I had a Twitter account that was hacked by a Belarusian hacker. So I knew you were going to ask me that question. So I literally just created an X account.
Okay.
It's called Brett on Stage. BRETTON Stage.
Okay. Brett on Stage is pretty easy.
I have 0 followers right now because I literally started it right before this broadcast. So if I get any followers, it'll be a good litmus test of how many people made it to the end of this this episode to see who followed me. And I'll keep you posted. My guess is 4. Let's see if it's over under 4. How many? What do you think?
I'm going to say over. I think we have more faithful listeners than you realize.
To the very end with a nobody like me, Alex?
I think they're going to enjoy your opening monologue, that they're going to stay for the end because they don't want to miss out on anything, right? They might want to hear about how Moses led the Egyptians, led the Israelites out of Egypt, excuse me. And,
hey, I'll tell you this. I'll give if you made it to the end here, let me give you one more little nugget.
Let's do it.
These Halliburton haters said that Halliburton was never going to hit, and he's got to stop, and he'll stop hitting clutch shots to win games. But like my friend William Montgomery said, I ain't ever going to stop hitting clutch winning shots. Go Pacers. Pacers in 5. Let's go.